She'd spent her career defending justice until justice turned on her. On a scorching afternoon, State Attorney Danielle Lawson stood in a parking lot searching for her missing purse when flashing lights stopped her breath. Within minutes, the woman who prosecuted criminals was handcuffed as one. Before we dive in, make sure you hit like and subscribe because stories like this deserve to be heard. The sun burned low over the courthouse parking lot, throwing long shadows across rows of silent cars. Danielle Lawson moved briskly between them, her heels clicking against the asphalt, frustration rising with every step. She had just finished a long day of meetings, 3 back-to-back hearings, a press briefing, and an impromptu call with the governor's office. All she wanted now was to get home, kick off her shoes, and breathe. But her purse was gone. She had set it on the passenger seat when she left the office, or at least she thought she had. Now the car door refused to open. Her key fob wasn't working either. She cursed softly under her breath and leaned against the vehicle, scanning the pavement as if the bag might materialize from thin air. Her phone, her wallet, her ID, everything important, was in that purse. A bead of sweat rolled down her temple. The lot was nearly empty, quiet except for the distant hum of traffic. The courthouse across the street gleamed like marble authority under the fading sun, a building she devoted her life to serving. Irony, she thought, had a cruel sense of timing. Danielle pulled gently on the car handle again, hoping the lock would give. Nothing. She exhaled sharply, glancing around for help. A security guard was nowhere in sight. The heat pressed down on her like judgment. She straightened her blazer, trying to maintain the composure that came so naturally in courtrooms but so rarely in parking lots. She didn't notice the patrol car creeping up behind her, nor the curious eyes watching her every movement. When the voice called out, sharp, commanding, and unfamiliar, "Ma'am, step away from the vehicle," Danielle froze. And in that moment, everything she thought she knew about justice began to unravel. The command hit Danielle like a slap. She turned slowly, careful not to appear startled. A police cruiser idled behind her, engine rumbling softly. The officer who stepped out was tall, heavy-set, his mirrored sunglasses catching the glare of the sun. His hand rested lazily, but unmistakably, on the holster at his side. "I said, step away from the vehicle." Danielle raised both hands slightly, her voice steady. "It's my car. I'm just trying to get in. I lost my purse." He cut her off. "Ma'am, we've had reports of break-ins in this area. I need to see some identification." Her jaw tightened. "I don't have it on me. My purse was inside. I can give you the plate number." "License and registration," he repeated, as if rehearsing a script. For a brief second, Danielle saw herself from the outside, a well-dressed black woman standing beside a luxury SUV, trying to explain herself to a man who'd already decided she was guilty. She tried again. "Officer, my name is Danielle Lawson. I'm the—" "Save it," he snapped. "Step back. Hands where I can see them." Her heart thudded. Not from fear, she'd stood before judges, argued with senators, but from disbelief. This wasn't supposed to happen to her. Not in broad daylight, not in front of the courthouse where she worked, not to someone who was the law. Still, she obeyed. Calmly. Deliberately. The officer circled her car, peered inside, and tugged at the handle. Then, turning back, he reached for his radio. "Possible 10 to 16, he muttered. "Suspect attempting entry." Danielle felt her stomach drop. Suspect. That was the word that changed everything. The word suspect echoed in Danielle's ears like a siren she couldn't shut off. She swallowed hard, forcing her voice to stay even. "Officer, I can explain, this is all a misunderstanding." Mulligan didn't look up. He was already talking into his radio, reporting her description as though she were a ghost he needed verified. Female, mid-30s, African-American, attempting entry into a black SUV. Uncooperative. Uncooperative. She almost laughed at the absurdity of it. "I'm not uncooperative," she said quietly. You haven't even let me speak. He turned to her then, ice cold behind his shades. Then stop talking and let me do my job. The parking lot felt smaller now, airtighter, heat heavier. A couple across the street slowed their walk to watch. Someone pulled out a phone. Danielle tried again. My name is Danielle Lawson. I'm the state attorney for. Mulligan scoffed. Right. And I'm the chief of police. He moved toward her. Turn around. Excuse me? Turn around and place your hands behind your back. Her mouth went dry. You're arresting me? For what? Suspicious behavior and resisting instructions. A hollow sound filled her ears as the cuffs clicked into place, metal biting into skin that had once shaken judges' hands and signed indictments. She looked up at the courthouse in the distance, that symbol of fairness she had built her life around. The building stood silent, indifferent. You're making a mistake, she whispered. Mulligan guided her toward the cruiser, smug satisfaction in his stride. That's what they all say. As the door shut behind her, Danielle felt something inside her shift, not just fear, but clarity. Justice, she realized, didn't always wear a badge. The steel door closed behind her with a final, echoing thud. Danielle sat in a metal chair bolted to the floor, wrists sore from the cuffs that had only just been removed. The air in the interrogation room was stale, heavy with coffee, sweat, and arrogance. A fluorescent light flickered above her, humming a steady reminder of how long she'd been waiting. Across the table, Officer Mulligan filled out paperwork, his pen scratching carelessly across the form. He didn't look at her once. So, he said finally, not glancing up, you still sticking to that story about being the state attorney? Danielle inhaled slowly. I'm not sticking to anything. It's the truth. He smirked, signing his name with a flourish. Sure it is. Funny how everyone's important when they get caught. Her hands clenched in her lap. Years of courtroom composure held her steady, even as the sting of injustice crawled under her skin. She had seen arrogance before, in defendants, in lawyers, even in judges, but never like this. This wasn't confidence. It was power without consequence. I need to make a phone call, she said firmly. Mulligan leaned back, pretending to consider. You'll get your call when I'm done processing you. Her eyes locked on his. Calm. Controlled. Dangerous in their stillness. You're violating protocol. And my rights. For the first time, he faltered, only for a second, before masking it with a grin. Lady, you can quote all the law books you want. Doesn't mean you're above it. Danielle didn't reply. Instead, she sat perfectly still, letting the silence stretch until it filled the room like judgment. She knew then that words wouldn't save her, not yet. But patience might. The clock on the wall ticked louder with every passing second. Danielle's patience was thinning, but her expression never wavered. Finally, the younger officer, the one who'd looked uneasy earlier, stepped inside. She's allowed a phone call, Mulligan, he said quietly. Mulligan's jaw tightened, irritation flashing across his face. Fine. Make it quick. He uncuffed her with unnecessary force, then gestured toward a dusty landline sitting on a corner desk. Danielle rubbed her aching wrists, lifted her chin, and walked over with quiet dignity. Every movement was deliberate, she refused to let them see weakness. She picked up the receiver, dialing the number she knew by heart. It rang once, twice, then a familiar voice answered. Mark Edwards. Mark, it's Danielle, she said, her tone calm but clipped. There was a sharp pause. Danielle? Where are you? I've been calling you all afternoon. I'm at Central Precinct, she said, forcing her voice steady. I've been arrested. They think I was trying to steal my own car. For a long second, there was silence. Then Mark's voice came back, low, precise, and burning with anger. Who arrested you? Officer Mulligan, she replied. White male, mid-40s, badge number 2714. And before you ask, no, he didn't check my ID or the registration. Mark exhaled sharply. Don't say another word to them. I'll be there in 20 minutes. Danielle hung up and turned toward Mulligan. He was watching her with a smirk that didn't quite reach his eyes. So, he said, your lawyer coming to save you? Danielle met his gaze, unflinching. No, she said evenly. Justice is. The room went silent. Even Mulligan looked away first. When the door opened again, the air in the room shifted. Mark Edwards stepped inside, tall, composed, and radiating quiet authority. His tailored gray suit and calm stride contrasted sharply with the sterile walls and the tension that clung to the room. Danielle rose from her chair, her eyes meeting his for a moment of shared relief. But beneath her calm exterior, anger still simmered, not just for herself, but for what this moment represented. Mark turned toward Officer Mulligan, his voice measured but firm. I'm here for State Attorney Danielle Lawson. You've made a serious mistake. Mulligan's smirk faltered. State Attorney, he repeated, disbelief flickering across his face. That's right, Mark replied, stepping closer. You arrested her without probable cause, failed to verify her ID, and refused to check the registration. That's not law enforcement, that's negligence. For a heartbeat, the room was silent except for the hum of the fluorescent lights. The younger officer looked uncomfortable, shifting his weight. Mulligan, however, squared his shoulders and tried to recover his swagger. She didn't have ID, he muttered. I followed procedure. Mark's eyes narrowed. Procedure, he said sharply. You never even ran her plates. You arrested the state attorney because you assumed she didn't belong to that car or that neighborhood. The accusation hung in the air like a blade. Mulligan's face reddened, but he said nothing. Danielle crossed her arms, her tone cool and precise. I told you who I was, she said quietly. You just didn't believe me. At that, Mulligan's gaze dropped to the floor. The room had shifted completely, authority no longer belonged to him. Justice had entered the building. The tension inside the room was electric when the door swung open once more. A tall man with silvering hair and a commanding presence stepped in, Chief David Hernandez. His sharp eyes swept over the scene, taking in Danielle, Mark, and the rigid stance of Officer Mulligan. What's going on here? Hernandez asked, his voice low but firm. Mark turned to face him, his tone measured but cutting. What's going on, Chief, is that your officer arrested the state attorney without cause, refused to verify her ID, and treated her like a criminal based on assumptions, not facts. Hernandez's gaze shifted to Danielle, and recognition dawned in his eyes. His jaw tightened. Ms. Lawson, he said, his voice softening, is this true? Danielle nodded calmly, though her voice carried the weight of restrained fury. Every word. I told Officer Mulligan who I was. I asked him to check the plates. He refused. He arrested me anyway. The chief turned to Mulligan, whose confidence was unraveling by the second. Is that accurate, officer? Mulligan hesitated. She didn't have ID on her. I thought. You thought? Hernandez interrupted sharply. You're supposed to know. You're supposed to verify. You don't get to make arrests based on what you think someone looks like capable of doing. The silence that followed was heavy and condemning. Mark stepped forward. Chief, I expect her release immediately, and a full investigation. Hernandez nodded gravely. She'll be released at once. And Officer Mulligan, we'll be reviewing your conduct personally. Mulligan looked down, the weight of his mistake settling on his shoulders. For the first time that day, Danielle felt the scales of justice begin, just barely, to tip back toward balance. The paperwork for Danielle's release took less than 10 minutes, far less time than the hours she'd spent being treated like a criminal. When it was over, Chief Hernandez personally handed her the release form and her belongings. He looked uneasy, guilt tugging at his expression. Ms. Lawson, I'm truly sorry, he said quietly. This should never have happened. Danielle nodded, her tone calm but unyielding. No, Chief. It shouldn't have. But it did, and that means something's broken. I intend to find out what. As she turned to leave, she saw Mulligan standing by the hallway, avoiding her eyes. His uniform suddenly looked less like authority and more like armor, something to hide behind. Danielle stopped. The room seemed to hold its breath. "Officer Mulligan," she called. He hesitated, then turned slowly. "Yes, ma'am?" She stepped closer, each word deliberate. "Do you know what it feels like to be handcuffed for existing? To be treated as a threat before you're treated as a person?" He shifted uncomfortably. "I was just doing my job." Her gaze sharpened. "No. You were doing what you thought your job was, protecting people who look like you from people who look like me." Mulligan's face flushed. "That's not fair." "Neither was this," she said softly, holding up her wrists, still marked by the cuffs. "But fairness is what I fight for. Every day. Even for people like you." For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then Danielle turned, shoulders squared, voice steady. "I'll see you again, officer. Just not from this side of the table." And with that, she walked out, not defeated, but reborn. Justice, at last, had a name. Cameras flashed like lightning as Danielle Lawson stepped up to the podium. The courthouse steps, once a symbol of her daily routine, now felt like a stage, one she had never intended to stand upon in this way. Reporters crowded below, their microphones extended like eager mouths. Mark stood behind her, silent but supportive. The chief had offered to handle the press, but Danielle had declined. Her story, her voice. She took a breath and began. "Yesterday, I was arrested outside this very courthouse, the same courthouse where I've spent years upholding the law." A murmur ran through the crowd. She continued, voice clear, unwavering. "I was accused of trying to steal my own car. I was handcuffed, humiliated, and denied the right to prove who I was, not because of what I did, but because of what I looked like." Her words cut through the noise like a verdict. "This isn't just about me. It's about every person who's been profiled, dismissed, or disrespected because of bias hidden beneath a badge. I believe in law enforcement, but I also believe in accountability." She paused, letting the weight of that truth settle. Cameras clicked. A reporter shouted, "Will you press charges, Ms. Lawson?" Danielle met their gaze. "I'm pressing for change," she said simply. "Not revenge. We can't fix what's broken with anger, but we can fix it with courage." Behind her, the courthouse gleamed in the sun, not as a monument to perfection, but as a reminder of the work still to be done. Danielle stepped back from the podium. The applause wasn't thunderous, but it was real. And for the first time since her arrest, she felt something stronger than anger, purpose. Weeks had passed since the arrest, but the echoes of that day hadn't faded, they had multiplied. What began as outrage in a courthouse parking lot had become a citywide conversation. Community leaders, civil rights groups, and even a few officers reached out, wanting to help turn Danielle's story into something larger. Now, she stood in a crowded council chamber, facing the city's police oversight committee. The air buzzed with quiet anticipation. "Madam State Attorney," the chairwoman said, "you've proposed something called the Lawson Initiative. Could you explain it?" Danielle nodded, her posture steady, her voice carrying conviction. "The Lawson Initiative is about accountability and education. It requires every officer to undergo annual bias training, mandates that all arrests be verified through multiple data checks, and ensures that citizens have access to footage and reports in every profiling-related case." She paused, scanning the faces before her, skeptics and supporters alike. "This isn't anti-police," she said firmly. "It's pro-justice. Because justice only means something when it applies to everyone, equally." The room murmured in agreement. A few nodded. Even Chief Hernandez, seated in the back, looked at her with something that resembled respect. Mark watched from the side, pride flickering behind his composed expression. "We can't rewrite what happened to me," Danielle continued, "but we can make sure it doesn't happen again. The law shouldn't just protect the powerful, it should protect the people. The vote was unanimous. The initiative passed. As Danielle stepped outside into the sunlight, the city felt different, not fixed, but moving. And for the first time in her career, justice didn't just feel like her job. It felt like her legacy. The evening sky shimmered with soft gold as Danielle walked along the same courthouse steps where her life had been upended. The air was cooler now, calmer, as though the city itself had exhaled. She paused where it all began, the spot in the parking lot where flashing lights had once painted her in accusation. The faint echo of that day lived on in her mind, the disbelief, the cold cuffs, the sting of being misjudged. But now, when she looked at that space, she didn't see shame. She saw proof that broken systems could bend, and sometimes, even begin to heal. Her phone buzzed. A text from Chief Hernandez. The first training under the Lawson Initiative begins tomorrow. Thank you for making us better. She smiled faintly. Not in triumph, but in peace. Across the street, a young black girl walked hand in hand with her mother, pointing toward the courthouse. Danielle overheard her small voice. Mama, that's where the lady who changed the rules works, right? Her mother nodded. That's her. For a moment, Danielle's throat tightened. Not from pride, but from understanding. Every law, every speech, every reform, none of it was about titles or vindication. It was about belonging. About ensuring that no one else would ever be made to feel like a stranger in their own city. She glanced up at the courthouse one last time, the building glowing softly in the twilight. Justice, she whispered, you took your time. But you found your way. And with that, Danielle Lawson turned away, not as a victim, not even as a survivor, but as a reformer. Her story had ended. Her movement had just begun.